Hello, and thank you for tuning in to Unmasking Autism with AFO. I am your host, Carley Marissa Dummitt. This podcast is presented by the Autism Foundation of Oklahoma and funded by the Oklahoma State Department of Health. For those who don't know, the Autism Foundation of Oklahoma strives to improve the lives of Oklahomans with autism across the lifespan. Before we jump in, I would just like to say that this podcast will discuss autism, suicide, mental health and wellness, among other topics, with autistic individuals and different professionals, with the goal of unmasking stereotypes, increasing awareness, advocating for mental health and wellness, and attempting to shatter the stigmas of these topics through conversation and personal experience. Hi, hello, welcome to Unmasking Autism with the Autism Foundation of Oklahoma. My name is Carley Marissa Dummitt, and I am the Marketing and Community Outreach Coordinator. I am also autistic, and for the main subject of this podcast, it is relevant for me to say that I'm also a stand-up comedian. So yes, thank you for tuning in. Before we get started, a little bit about AFO. Our mission is to improve the lives of Oklahomans with autism across the lifespan. And to fulfill our mission, we focus on a few different key aspects. We do a lot of professional development, mainly focused in the areas of workforce development, justice reform, advocacy, public health and safety, early childhood and social inclusion. And then there's my job, which focuses on community events for autistic people and their parents, caregivers that promote mental health and wellness. For those who don't know, just gonna read a little bit. According to the National Institute of Mental Health, autism spectrum disorder, shortened at ASD, is a neurological and developmental disorder that affects how people interact with others, communicate, learn, and behave. People with ASD often have difficulty with communication and interaction with other people, restricted interests, and repetitive behaviors, and symptoms that affect their ability to function in school, work, and other areas of life. Autism is known as a spectrum disorder because there is a wide variation in the type and severity of symptoms people experience. People of all genders, races, ethnicities, and economic backgrounds can be diagnosed with autism. Although autism can be a lifelong disorder, treatments and services can improve a person's symptoms and daily functioning. This podcast will discuss autism, suicide awareness and prevention, mental health, wellness, and other important topics with autistic people and professionals. These are my friends who are also comics and just so happen to also all be autistic. It's great. Before we jump into a formal introduction, I do just want to say some risk factors for suicide in autistic people are co-occurring mental health conditions, masking, autistic burnout, being a female, lack of social support and isolation, and late diagnosis. Suicide is the second leading cause of death among autistic people. So there you go. And to get started, we are going to introduce my friends, and we will start with Meredith. Meredith,
Hi.
hello.
I'm Meredith Everett, they, them, she, her, and been doing comedy for about a year and a half now, and I love it. I feel like it's the best way to be weird with a bunch of people.
Yeah. All right, great. Sir?
My name is Cody Troutman, also a stand-up comedian for the last couple of years. I think before the time of my life that I did comedy, the things I did, which were business and professional golf, was very serious and structured, which appealed to one part of my nature, but left the other side of me that, pushes out of your comfort zone and really develops and improves pretty starved. So I'm interested to see what the conversations around autism, comedy, self-expression lead us to.
Okay. I'm Ashley Bartlett. I started comedy in January, so I haven't been doing it for very long. I was a late in life diagnosis for autism. And so up until my diagnosis, it was just a lot of lost jobs, feeling lost, not knowing what to do with myself. And the diagnosis has really changed my life. And so comedy is a way for me to it's a good outlet to release all of the depression and frustration and trauma that I've experienced as a result of going without that diagnosis.
Great, yeah. I have been doing comedy for a year and a half. But before that, I have performed in a lot of different aspects. I'm a trained Meisner actress. I've done a lot of improv for the last few years. And I'm an award-winning filmmaker, just to top that off. Oh, yes, claps, claps, claps. All right, so yeah. So I know y'all touched on it very briefly, but our first question that we're going to talk about is, can you share how autism has affected you personally, and what are some ways it presents in yourself? Like, for example, has your diagnosis impacted your mental health, your relationships, and your career? And if so, what are some ways you practice coping and wellness?
Oh my gosh.
We can just jump right in.
Before, I do have a question before the question.
Yeah.
So, are we allowed to like make jokes?
Yeah, no, of course.
Okay.
Actually,
No
no,
jokes.
I didn't wanna see,
that would, yeah, no, of
Okay.
course, yeah, we're all comics and
Okay.
we're all autistic, so of course, no, yes, please, let's make jokes.
Okay. Just check it.
Yeah, no, of course, yeah, that's the whole point of this.
Gotcha. I didn't want to just start like
No.
roasting people.
I feel like that's a super autistic question to ask. It's like, because I was always told, ask for forgiveness, not permission. And that never made sense to me. I've always been like, where's the line?
Yeah.
Where is exactly the line?
Yeah, I was gonna. It's interesting because I was gonna follow that up by saying these questions do our answers need to be like 30 seconds, 2 minutes, 5 minutes?
We're just having a combo.
Just right. Okay,
We're just
having a
chill out.
conversation.
Yep, no,
my
but-
weakest area. Okay.
Yeah.
Let's start
Just an
talking
organic, unstructured conversation.
Yeah.
Right
Yeah.
in
Well,
the
we
middle
have
of
a
my
little-
expertise.
We have a little bit of structure.
No, continue.
No, but so actually, yeah, that's a great place. Ashley, you already said you were a late in life diagnosis. So can you share a little bit, like, what do you care if mind saying how old you are and when you were diagnosed?
So I'm 38 now, and it was over the last few years that I got the diagnosis. It was difficult to get. I went through the proper assessment and was told that I didn't have autism because I make eye contact. Something else too, I struggle a lot with meltdowns, and it's not something that's discussed very openly. And the way I explained it to my doctor, I was like, I don't always have these outbursts and stuff in public. Like, I can go hide in the bathroom or something and like have these meltdowns. He was like, well, autistic people can't do that. He's like, that's trauma. And so like everything just kept going back to like my own personal trauma as the explanation. And it kind of dwindled down after like 9 months of getting treatment with him, where I was like, why do I still feel this way? Like, why do I still feel like chronically overwhelmed? Why can't I cope? And I was just like, tell me what's wrong with me, please. And he just like gave me this like really like slow shrug, And so I contacted my primary care. I was like, do you have any women that could help me that are familiar with autism? And so I saw a psychiatrist, and she was like, oh yeah, you're on the spectrum. I'm going to get you with an occupational therapist so we can kind of see where your social issues are either anxiety or if it's spectrum related. And then I also found a therapist that was familiar with autism in females, and she had pretty bad sensory processing disorder as well. That's probably one of my biggest problems. And so it wasn't easy to get the diagnosis, and it's like I still would like to try and find like a doctor that really specializes in like late in life diagnoses in females, because it presents like so differently. But I mean, I just have a very long history within the mental health system. I've been diagnosed with countless disorders, been on so many types of medications. I've been in and out of like treatment in psychiatric facilities, done the cognitive behavioral therapy, like every DBT, CBT, like somatic therapy. And it's like a lot of these things don't work for people with autism. I mean, like it helps us work through like trauma and stuff that maybe we've experienced as a result of autism or just life. But there are things that like just, I wasn't getting better, And so getting that diagnosis has like drastically changed my life and my perspective of myself. I give myself a lot more grace now, I believe. I appreciate everything that I've been through and everything that I've struggled through. So it's just been like, it's been life-changing to know this about myself, because I've had like 4 severe autistic burnouts in my lifetime, which is just like a nervous breakdown basically. And I just, like the last one I had, I didn't really think I was going to recover from it, So like I try to be really aware of how my autism affects just pretty much every aspect of my life, because it was what was like the downfall of my mental health,
I relate to a lot of what you're saying.
Yeah.
Quite a bit.
Yeah.
And it was about, I think, 6 years from the first time somebody suggested that I might be autistic to when I got the diagnosis.
Yeah.
And it was a woman who did the diagnosis, and she noticed things that I didn't even know I did.
Yeah.
And that was very validating, because I think a lot of us, if we're self-diagnosed before the professional diagnosis, if that happens, there's so much like imposter syndrome, and it's just like, well, you're just wanting to be autistic, but nobody really explains like why you would want to be that, like why that's the desire. But it's just because nothing else has worked, you know. And I went through, I had to do an outpatient, well, it's like I called it butterfly net camp. Like I took off a month of work, and I would go in, and they would tell me, don't end things. Can I say that? Is that
yeah.
I was like, how do I?
That was a podcast about suicide.
Don't kill yourself. And I was like,
don't
I don't
commit
know.
not alive. You know?
Yeah, don't unalive yourself, as TikTok would say.
I was just thinking about TikTok. Yeah,
it has made us so weird about the topic.
Yeah, it really has.
But they'd be like, don't kill yourself, and I'd be like, I kind of want to, and they were like, don't do it, and I was like, all right. We did that for about a month, and they said I was bipolar because I had said, they said, do you have any long-term friends? And I was like, not really. Like I had lost every friendship that I had had over the years, not necessarily all of them in a burning fire, but a lot of them in a burning fire, more than should, because people would love me and I would love them and things would be great. And then all of a sudden, out of nowhere, I had like not met an expectation or a need and not known why. It happened with relationships, and it happened with friendships, and it happened with jobs. And you just start to think that you're broken, you know? And of course you're depressed, because you constantly think you're trying to use tools for neurotypicals, and it's like using a hammer to try to screw in a nail. You're just constantly banging your head against the wall. Anyway, I got my diagnosis, and now I'm a lot kinder to myself. And honestly, that's been better than almost any therapy, is just being like, oh, of course you had a meltdown. You went into Target without headphones. Like, no, that's not weird. That totally makes sense.
Yeah. And how old were you when you got diagnosed?
I was 34.
Okay.
Yeah, I'm 36 now.
Okay, cool.
And at work, especially, huge difference. Because now when everybody at my job knows to just tell me stuff.
Mm-hmm.
They don't have to couch it in layers of like subtext. You can be like, hey, you messed up on this thing. Can you fix it? And I'll be like, yes.
Yeah.
Oh, yes, thank you.
Nope, yep.
It's a sweet blessing.
Yep. And Cody, do you want to share? I know from your comedy you were diagnosed as a child.
Yeah. It's interesting the point you just made about like, no, just tell me. I don't need like the fluff and the context. Throughout my life, I've been told simultaneously that I'm a terrible communicator and an excellent communicator.
Yes.
And it just depends on what the situation is. I think if the expectations are clearly outlined and the stakes are clearly outlined and it's about like tangible things, I would say that I'm, you know, and not to brag, just to contextualize, like in the top 1% of communication ability. But in terms of like, if there's no stakes or context and it's just like trying to have a conversation, I always feel very lost.
Yeah.
And I've had people that I've known for years, especially in relationships, tell me that at the end they felt like they didn't know me at all. Yeah. And in a weird way that hurts. And I'm like, well, I was trying to be known. But so I thought that was a great point of, you know, understanding. And I would say that I don't think, you know, like I don't want to make it sound like I'm saying it's other people's responsibility to know like how to talk to Cody. It's like, now that I know that about myself, I can seek out conversations that I'll be able to better participate in, or if I'm not participating well in a conversation, being like, hey, you know, like this, and this, is this what you're expecting? Kind of, you know, clarifying intentions, I guess. But yeah, so I would say that the way that it was like autism was handled in my family was definitely different. And this is why I was like, I don't know if I'm like the best autism spokesperson in this regard, because, you know, we found out when I was little, and my mom's reaction was, okay, like everybody's got something. So you have a struggle. Everybody has a struggle. You're going to figure out how to deal with your thing. It's an explanation, not an excuse. Then it's just like never mentioned again. And I think where I divert from like more modern thinking is I thought that was great, because I think I definitely would have latched onto it, and like the struggles I had growing up, I would have probably assumed, because I'm a very rigid thinker, oh, this is my ceiling. I have a struggle in this area. I'm just going to struggle. but because it was kind of handled a little more nebulously and I was young, I was like, well, I'm struggling with this. Everybody else is handling it like this. I just got to figure out a different way to handle it. And it led to, there were some like internal struggles, but it led to a lot of high achievement as well, because I just went into everything with the expectation it's going to be harder for me than it will be for everybody else. I just have to figure out a framework and a system of how to approach this. And I know that if I can do that, I'll catch up and pass everybody that has left me behind. So I do think there's pros and cons to the way that it was handled within my family. I wouldn't go out and like espouse, hey, if you got a autistic kid, just tell them, figure it out. But at the same time, like my mom was incredibly supportive in other areas. It was not like she was trying to dismiss it. It was that, and I know I'm like rambling on, but my mom, she came from like, people say poor, like crazy poverty. Like,
my mom too, yeah.
And basically built her life out of it. And by the time I was born, comfortably middle class. Not rich, but like doing fine. Yep. And so she just had this belief that, my family was, like her parents, had kids young, super abusive, absentee. She raised all her siblings. And she was just like, everybody's got something. Like, she's just very much like everybody else in her family still make excuses and are not very well off. And she's like, well, you just have to figure it out. And so that was kind of her mindset. But she was also very supportive, like growing up. And like when I tell this story, it sounds like I'm like 7 years old, but this is when I was like 18. I don't know why I thought this was, but like I would only sleep in a sleeping bag, and I would sleep in a different room of the house every night. And my dad was like, this is ridiculous. You got to go sleep in your bed. And my mom was like, okay, he's the number one student in his school. He's the captain of the golf team. He never gets in trouble. Who's it hurting if he wants to sleep under the kitchen table in a sleeping bag? And my mom would just like every night she's like, all right, where are you going to be at tonight? And I was like, I'm thinking the den, and so she was also very cool about that stuff. She didn't mind,
I love that.
So it wasn't that she was some like enemy. It was just handled in a different way. But I think it was weird that stuff like that, like, it's like everybody still jokes about it. It's really funny.
No, I just like how you literally cracked your neck.
Yeah, you did.
I was like, boys, we're going to the den tonight. The AC there's a little strong. We're going to have to bundle up. We're going to make it through,
That sounds awesome, actually.
But yeah, it was great. It was great. I still do it sometimes just for fun. Like, I remember these.
I love that.
No, of course. Yeah. No, I was also diagnosed as a child. And it happened because every social situation I was put in, the people that were in charge of that situation would tell my parents, she has no friends. She doesn't really seem to like get it. Like she's basically like, she's really different. And then I had like a really stressful time in my life. And I actually was like pretty suicidal at a very young age. I was 9. So I had to be put in a children's psych ward. And I was there for a whole summer, and my parents had this doctor, look at me. And then at the end, he diagnosed me with autism, Asperger's, ADHD, clinical depression, and generalized anxiety. So my autism diagnosis was also encompassed by like how depressed and suicidal I was at a very young age. Exactly. No, yeah. He's pointing to the co-occurring mental health conditions. But yeah, no, my parents jumped right into therapy, treatment, meds. But yeah, no, I relate a lot with what you said when you were like, long-term relationships. I have struggled greatly with long-term relationships. But that is something I wanted to, briefly touch on is like romantically or platonically, like how do you guys, I know you touched on it, but like how does autism present for you in your relationships? Like I'll say, to piggyback off what you were saying about the communication aspect, I also feel like sometimes I'm an amazing communicator, but if you put me in a romantic relationship, I don't know anything. I have no idea what's happening. Like whenever I am dating somebody, I inform them of my autism. and then I expect them to do their due diligence and like research it. Most of them do not, but it's like for me in relationships, when I am put into an emotional situation where I think the other person is upset at me, or I know like an emotional thing is happening, it's almost like a switch in my brain turns off and I just no longer can navigate the situation.
Mm-hmm.
I have absolutely no idea what's happening. And it's really frustrating for me and the other person.
Yeah.
Probably more so for the other person, but I don't like when people use subtext with me. I'm like, you just need to tell me.
What do you want me to want?
Or like, what are you trying to say? Because like normal people speak in, these like subtextual ways, or, like someone will send you a song. Like every time a guy's ever sent me a song, I'll listen to it and I'll be like, I know what I'm thinking is not right.
Wait, is there another reason he could send you a song? Like,
I don't know. I
don't know what it doesn't it mean, like I love you or like I like you.
It can, sure. So
I guess it depends. If it's like if something really violent,
but
maybe not.
Like sometimes people send music as a way to like communicate and be subtextual.
Yeah.
And like, my brain goes into a very like you were saying, like and it just become very analytical, and it's like if the whole song is about love and then there's one line about how they dislike the other person, I'm like, oh well, if he hates her, that's why he said it to me. He's letting me know through this song that he doesn't want to date me anymore.
Yeah, that's tricky.
But how how
I didn't actually start dating at all. I had one partner who was a guy, and I was 23, I think, and he initiated everything. Like he asked me out. He told me we were on a date on the date. I was like, whoa. He's like, this is the best date I've ever been on. And I was like, oh, that's a date. And like we stayed together for 3 years. I think just because I thought like he was super nice, and I'm gay, but I didn't realize that at the time. And he was so nice and he was comfortable. And I thought, I don't know how to date. So and then I blamed all those years from when we broke up to, later. I just thought, like, I'm just ugly. Like, there's just something, like, I must be, or I'm just too weird or whatever. And as soon as I got my autism diagnosis, like, that month, I started dating. All of a sudden, I was on a date with a woman, and I was like, holy shit. And it was just because I didn't know that there was a game happening. Mm-hmm. Like, I had grown up learning what dating meant by watching movies. And in movies, when someone likes you, they do things in a certain order.
Yes.
And they,
very much so, yeah.
It's like, and that you meet at the office, oops, oh, that's my water bottle. And then they hate you for a while. And then you suddenly, and it just wasn't happening. It just kept not happening and not happening. And I mean, you can only do that for so long and not start to think like, I'm just not, And ever since that diagnosis, I'm not going to say I'm like a Lothario, but I'm going to say, I find it a lot easier to approach women. I find it a lot easier to date because I can just be like, hey, if I don't make eye contact, it's not because I don't want to talk to you. Yeah. And I just tell them that. I was like, hey, just so you know, that doesn't mean, if anything, I'm listening more intently to what you're saying if I look away. Or, if I get overstimulated and I start getting kind of weird, then I'll just, I'll go to the bathroom and chill for a second, or I'll put in my earplugs. Like I have all these tools now, whereas I used to just would have bounced and assumed that they hated me because I couldn't understand the signals. So, yeah. Oh, yeah. And I got to have a situationship for the first time. At 33, yeah.
Congrats.
Yeah.
Those are always...
It was fun.
I was going to say, those are tough.
Yeah. It took me a really long time to figure out that's what it was.
Yeah.
I was like, I looked up the definition like multiple times. Like, is this? But technically it's not. My friend was like, yes, no, that's a situation.
What is a situationship? It sounds like a relationship that's not a relationship. Is
exactly.
That, okay.
Yeah. So from what I understand, it's a relationship that's like has the trappings of a relationship, but there's no commitment and there's no like emotional vulnerability. So and usually one party is more invested. Yeah. That's kind of the hallmark of it. That's tough. So yeah, took me a while to figure that out.
Yeah. What about you guys? It doesn't have to be romantic, just relationships in general.
I mean, I feel like there's a few factors that like contribute to why like relationships don't tend to last for me. Excuse me. I just feel like I don't really know where to start with like connecting with people. And so like I often will get like too personal, or I'll pry on personal things too much, because I'm like, well, if it's something that I've experienced and I can relate to them, then like maybe that'll be a connection. I don't know how to talk to people about the weather. I try, you know what I mean? Like these like very surface level things, like I really struggle with. But I also, so like something, whenever I learned what masking was, I was like, there's no way I'm autistic. Like I'm just authentically myself. I just don't hold back. And then I'm like, I totally mask like all the time, you know, and it shows in relationships where you have masking right now. It shows in relationships where it's like things will start out fine. And as time goes on and on and on, it's like, she's weird. She's temperamental. She says strange things. I don't really want to be around her anymore. And it's just like, it happens. And it always like, once I've been around a group of people or friends for about a year, I'm like, this is about the time that it's going to fall through, you know? Yes. So, and I've struggled with romantic relationships, but I think a lot of it too, like I find myself so often just being like, what do you mean? Why are you doing that? And it's not rhetorical. It's not me being rude. I just like simply don't understand this behavior and what you're saying to me, you know? But I also just like don't really enjoy romantic relationships, and I've kind of just came to terms with that, and I'm okay with it. I feel like I'm more honest with myself now. Honestly, since I've been diagnosed with autism, I'm just like, nobody told me that it was okay to not get married and have children or not maintain. Like I've been in one relationship in the last decade, and it was like for a year, and I just ended up just not enjoying it. I would have much rather been friends with him. So
that's my question.
Yeah.
That's what I'm trying to get to the heart of.
Yeah.
Is it just because of the wrong experiences, or is it because we're like not compatible with it? Because I'm having the same feelings. Like it's so much stress.
Yeah.
It's so much constant unknown.
Yeah.
Because even if things are good, you're like, well, was I supposed to? And I keep wondering if you're with an autistic person, will it be different? Because so far it's been, I mean, I don't know, maybe. But I don't know. That's the question I have.
Yeah.
With friends, it's been different.
Yeah.
It's not as painful now.
Yeah.
That's the main reason. Sorry, I mean,
that's fine.
That's the main reason I wanted to end things originally, is because it felt like, okay, being alone hurts too much, and having friends hurts too much. And I was like, well, because I had a best friend at the time that was like the person who got me more than anyone else was autistic as well. And I thought, well, if being friends with that person still hurts this much, then I got nothing. But then after the diagnosis, I don't know, things changed. Now I don't have friendships in my life that hurt. And I have been able to hold on to friends for longer. So I don't know. It's, at least with friendship, it's gotten better.
Yeah.
But I haven't been able to translate that into dating yet.
Do you feel like some of it has to do with like knowing yourself better?
100%.
Yeah. Like I feel like before it's like I just didn't. And there's other factors, contributing factors, like I've kind of become estranged from certain family members and like kind of cut toxic situations out of my life. But I feel like Ashley now when I didn't before. I didn't feel like my own person.
That's good.
Yeah, and so this is just like, because I mean, just tracing all the way back to like when I was very little, there's so many signs that like I had autism. And like my family, we don't discuss it. I went to them to help with my assessment and had bad reactions, so I've just never approached them again, you know. But some of their favorite stories to tell me are Ashley used to just spin circles in the yard for hours. If we didn't know where Ashley was, she was in the yard spinning in circles till she fell down.
My grandma had my grandma had schizophrenia, and they used to call me, her name was Samantha, they used to call me Little Sammy. Yeah. Because I would just be sitting there with nothing, just staring. And they were like, you look like you're on schizophrenia drugs.
Yeah. Yeah. That's my mom was always like,
super fun.
Yeah. She's like, you would have been a good only child because you just sat in your room alone all the time. And I'm like, was that not alarming? I'd go in the woods. That's something else that was like a good therapy for me. Is
what?
Or just go in the woods.
I did that too.
Yeah.
At school.
I also went into the woods.
Did we also?
Yeah, that's right. Yeah, you gotta ran off.
Like going in the woods and murder a small animal. To finally feel something as I watch the life drain from their eyes.
Oh my God. Oh
I
my
wasn't
God.
doing that.
This is the part of the session where the therapist would be like,
Yeah.
You guys as dogs didn't command you to kill people?
Oh,
Oh, you
gosh.
son of...
Okay. I'm sorry, Ashley.
Yeah.
I mean,
You're in the
yes,
woods.
Yeah, I'm in
Yeah.
the woods. No,
What's
I
your
think,
weapon of choice?
I would take a machete with me into the woods.
Machete.
Okay.
Yeah.
economical choice.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, I mean, I grew up like in the sticks in Northeast Texas, so
Yeah.
I mean, like it was very much the middle of nowhere. But we had tons of animals, and they were my therapy, you know. And that it was just like a good escape. Like my home life was extremely loud and dysfunctional in certain ways, you know, and it was hard to deal with. It was hard to cope. So I would just stay to myself a lot. But I always felt like most at ease and most calm when I was in nature. I prefer being in places where animals outnumber people. You know,
That's
like
fair.
I'm like more content in places like that. So,
Not one animal has started a war.
yeah.
Except for us.
Yeah. But
Anyways, Cody, what you touch on relationships for us?
I would say, yeah, any type of interpersonal relationship, whether it be romantic or friendship-wise, those are tough. I remember,
His lips. I'm sorry.
Yeah.
That's why I'm smiling.
they're tough. And it is, I think that's maybe an area that I, like, why I don't talk about it seriously as much is because I think it's funny, but a lot of people are like, no, it's, you know, like when I talk about things I've struggled with, I also think it's funny. I'm like, it is funny to struggle with that, but at the same time, I don't want other people who like struggle with the same stuff to be like, oh, this guy's talking mess.
If it happened to you, it's your right to laugh at it.
But yeah, I just but it's yeah, no, it's fine to laugh. You're like, sorry, but it's fine to I would say like from the time I was really little, I always thought it would be cool to be part of a friend group. I just never was. I just didn't know how to do that. I would try really hard, much to my own embarrassment usually, but I never could quite like assimilate into a friend group. And I have one best friend that the way we became friends was I was a freshman in high school. He was a sophomore, and I was in the upper level math class. Gang. And this really attractive girl that was a grade above me in this math class she sucked at math. As women do. No, I'm just kidding. And I know. And because I was trying to flirt, I was like, I don't know how to flirt. I do know geometry. Like, come on, you know? And so I would help her with her math, and she was appreciative of it. And so she was like, well, you can come to my birthday dinner. Okay. And so there was like 20 of like the coolest sophomores, and I was a freshman. And I was like, damn, like I made it. And I remember like I got excited. So I was like making all these jokes, and looking back, I see what was happening, but I didn't realize at the time everybody was like, this guy is so weird. Who invited him? And my best friend, who I had not met yet, he was like the only person that everybody in school thought was awesome. Like everybody wanted to be this guy's friend. And I was making everybody feel weird. Not like inappropriate weird, just kind of like, this is bizarre. And he was like, what's your name? I was like, I'm Cody. He's like, you're a funny guy. We're going to be friends. And I was like, I get a friend out of this?
He called it. He named
did.
it.
He was like, dude. He's like, we're gonna. And after that, everybody was like trying to impress him, so they were nice to me. So I just thought I was killing it.
Yeah,
that's amazing.
But after that day, like we became pretty fast friends, and I had never really like stayed the night at somebody's house or like done friend type stuff. And he would just tell me, he's like, hey, the football game, the home game next Friday. He's like, what me and my friends do is like, we go, you know, we're in the student section. We go to Waffle House after, and we go back to my house, and we all stay the night. He's like, if you want, you should join. I was like, wow, that sounds awesome. So, you know, did that, and, you know, that just became like a regular thing. And I was like, all right, I have one friend. And then over time, it became like best friends over the next couple of years. And I was in high school. That was over 10 years ago, and we're still best friends to this day.
That's
and
amazing.
It's like, that's the only person I've ever felt like the way we communicate, like he gets it. Yeah, it's like very straightforward. It's a lot of like, here's a situation that we're going to outline and, you know, go about in this way.
He sounds direct.
Yeah, super direct and very self-aware and like a deep thinker. So it's been a very rewarding friendship. You know, learned a bunch about myself as well, but also the type of friend that like holds you accountable. You know, like whether I was in other relationships or pursuing other friendships or pursuing like personal projects, you know, he was always willing to tell me like, hey, like when you're doing this, I think it brings out your best qualities. That's a great thing. Or the way you're pursuing this girl, it's clear that, you know, you're kind of like compromising who we both know you to be to try to like fit into this thing.
Wow.
Yeah, he's a very, and he expected the same from me as a friend. Like if he was doing things that, you know, he didn't think were in his best interest, you know, he depended on me to say, hey, you know what, I think, you know, to ask the questions or challenge the notions that it's like when you envision like what would a perfect friend do, it's like that we expected that out of each other. And so I think that was really cool as well, is I got to have those experiences of like, oh, I wish, you know, someone would ask me this or call me out on this. It's like, and I had a best friend to do that. Or man, if I'm really struggling, I wish I had somebody to be like, brother, you know, I got you. And so that was really cool. I think that got me through a lot of times that I wouldn't have gotten through as successfully, kind of just adrift. But when it comes to romantic relationships, in some areas I've figured out how to have success, and then other areas not as much. I think that again, this is so funny. This best friend, you know, he's very popular. A lot of women liked him. Him and I are straight, so we're guys. We like girls, and that's the definition of that. I'm freaking smart, dude.
If you didn't know.
And so I would ask him like, you know, how do you like conversate with women? And he knew that I wasn't asking about pickup lines. He knew that I was literally asking, how does a conversation go? Because it's not like I could talk to men either, but I wasn't romantically interested in men.
Yeah.
So it was just, so basically we would just practice how to have a conversation.
He role played with you.
Yeah,
100%.
that's
Yeah.
That's awesome.
You know, leather, all that. But you might have, I was going to say, I almost made a inappropriate
We hedged the
reference,
line
but,
there.
Yep.
Not bad though.
But it was not that he was teaching me how to flirt. It was that he was teaching me, this is how like human beings interact. And so, and he was always willing to kind of break it down like a science project of like, oh, this is, you know, beep, burp, burp. And so that was like, I started to understand how to have conversations. And it wasn't like flirting tactics. It was literally just like, oh, this is, if you're trying to strike up some type of connection with somebody that you don't know, what are the expectations for that? How does that look? So that helped me a lot with, and then once I found out, oh, this applies to just any conversation. It's not just a dating thing. That helped a lot. As far as like long-term relationships go, the long-term relationships I've been in, well, the first one I was in high school, so that one went really badly, but just in a hilarious way. It was just like, you know, I liked her, she liked me at first, then she did, and then I was like, no. And so that was pretty much it. But I would say more recently, like I just got out, sounds like I escaped, that really wasn't, but I just ended a almost 3-year relationship, or just, or did you have a point to make? I thought you were jumping in.
No.
And I would say that it didn't end because of anything that was bad. Like my partner, she's fantastic, and she's the best person I've ever met. So I'm not saying that there was any deficiencies in the relationship, but it did show me like, here's what a relationship is supposed to look like. I think because I had no idea, like I think that was a question I didn't realize ran so deep. Is like I've never thought in terms of, oh, I want this, I don't want that, or this is good, this is bad, when it comes to interpersonal relationships. But I realized that I always thought in terms of like, what should it look like? How should I feel? What should I be doing? Like, how do I like get on the correct track to do the step-by-step things? I just didn't know. And being with her, it revealed to me like, you don't really have to know that stuff if you do find somebody who understands how you communicate and you figure out how they communicate. Like early on in our relationship, it was like we were just totally different, but we were committed to learning about each other. And so I'm trying not to give all this backstory, but you were saying like it hasn't quite translated to dating yet. It's interesting how like building friendships is so similar to like building a romantic connection, because it's like it was just two people. We wanted to get to know each other better and serve each other in the best way. And so like little things she would do is if she had an idea for a date, or if there was like a family get together she wanted me to go to, or she wanted me to come to her friend's thing, or like she would assign a 1 through 10 rating scale of how important it was to her.
Oh, that's so cute.
And it was so
That's
helpful.
really nice.
Because, she'd be like, hey, my friend has this event going on. I'd love for you to come with me as my date, but I'm going to go with my friend regardless, even if you don't want to go. So it's a 3 out of 10. I'm fine going solo.
That's awesome.
But then there
That
was
is
this,
awesome.
then
I
there
want
was
that
this.
in everybody.
Yeah,
She was like, hey,
yeah.
my family's going on this ski trip. I want you to come with us. And I was like 100% not going. And she was like, I would say this is like an 8.5, 9 out of 10. And I was like, all right, I got to go on this ski trip, I
Okay,
guess.
yeah.
And so like
Wow.
little stuff like that, I don't like instituting that within.
Accommodations.
Yeah, and I wouldn't even say it was like accommodating because we made it like a fun, flirtatious thing where it's like every little thing we would start just like assigning, number values to or communicate in different ways. But I think like you were saying, it really comes back. I went on quite the tangent here, but basically it kind of comes back to like knowing yourself is most important. Like, how do I communicate most effectively? What are areas I struggle in? And then knowing, okay, these are areas I have to improve in. These are areas I excel in. So if I can play to my strengths and find someone who I can convey information to, like, hey, I communicate better this way, but I'm willing to meet you halfway over here. That's in friendships and relationships. I think that can be really important. But yeah, I think knowing whatever you're whether it's like being autistic or speaking Spanish or whatever it is, you got like if you know what your strengths and weaknesses are, and you know what you're capable of and incapable of, kind of playing to your strengths and being upfront with somebody about that early on does help a lot.
Oh, yeah, I actually really like that number scale thing. I'm gonna.
Yeah, no.
Yeah.
I might steal that
That's,
from you.
yeah.
I was
Cody.
going to implement
No,
that.
I really
100%.
That just
Oh,
like clicked something.
She
in
was
my
also
brain.
the one because, and I'm not like this is not a secret. Like she really wanted me to get along with her family, as you do, of course. And her family and I got along infamously. Like it was just really bad. And I would always ask because they would always just be upset with me for something. It was something new every time. And my phrase that I used to her was like, I want to know what the expectation is before I don't meet it. And that was like a big difference in like my communication with her family is it's all very like loose and like a lot of subtext, a lot of just like
Passive aggression.
yeah, a lot of like this, like, we have this understood inside type of, and I was just like, not only would it be kind of hard for anybody to kind of assimilate into that, but I'm like, I'm totally lost here, folks. I gotta, and so I said like, I want to know what the expectation is before I don't meet it. And, her family's all adults. So it's like, it's not like little kids that are going to grow up and change how they communicate. She's like, well, they're just how they are. But we kind of sat down for like a whole weekend and we came up with this thing. And basically we parsed it down to word count, body language, and punctuation. So like in a conversation, if I'm monitoring those three things, I can kind of gauge the temperature of the interaction.
Okay.
So like based on how many words somebody's saying to me, based on like if their torso and hips is like facing away or towards me, and based on like the punctuation at the end of the sentences, I can know, is this a conversation that they want to continue, or if I like upset somebody and I need to back off. And most of the time, because I knew that it wasn't going to go well, I would be participating less than the desired amount.
Which they might have taken as standoffish.
Right.
Yeah, because at first I was like all gung ho, and then everybody's like, we really don't like this guy. And so I was like, well, I don't really know how to like tweak. So I'm just, backseat. You guys as family, then like, oh, he hates us.
Yeah.
So then it's like I'm participating more, and they're like, we don't like the way you participated. And I was like, okay, I would like to know how I need to participate. And they're like, well, just don't be weird, be normal. And I was like, yeah, I mean, I'm trying. And so I think that was the body language, word count, punctuation, and then the rating scale thing. Those were fun and flirty
That sounds
ways.
Yeah, no,
Cool.
that's very.
Yeah, it was really cool. No, because she was great. She kind of understood that like we approached things differently and kind of had like a different, mental track. And so, there are people out there who 100% not only are like okay if your brain works a little different, but think it's cool, because she was always like, I think about things this way, you think about don't, you will 100%, if a romantic relationship is something you're looking for, like Ashley was saying, it's not like a goal that has to be striven towards, I don't know.
Strive.
But yeah, I think that's
Striven.
it's
Yeah.
absolutely
No,
yeah.
You
So
strive for
This
it.
is gonna bug us.
Yeah.
what's that scene from The Office? They wouldn't take headed of. They wouldn't heed of my
Oh,
name,
yeah.
Dwight.
I'm
But
not an
gonna
Office
say-
fan.
yeah,
So this is really interesting. So tell me if you guys relate to this. In a group dynamic, it feels like I take a running jump at it. And I will either land on the side of lovable weird or despised weird.
yeah, for sure.
And
For sure.
it's one or the other.
Yeah.
And luckily, I think because of the way my face looks, I tend to land on the lovable side. Little old Meredith, that's just Meredith. And it's funny you mentioned about the friend in high school, the cool friend. In elementary school, I was bullied all to hell, just mercilessly bullied. And people thought I was really, really weird in a bad way. And then I went to middle school, and Parker Farrell, a guy I grew up with, he went to my middle school, and the first day he was like, Meredith! Oh, and he hugged me. Oh, this is Meredith. And I knew, I was like, okay, I'm going to be lovable weird here.
Nice.
And it gave me this
Huge.
sort of clinical environment to study where those lines were and those social rules, because I could mess up, but it was okay. It's like, oh, that's just Meredith. They used to call me like the nutty professor, just lovable weirdo, But when I was in high school, I remember having this moment that was like the Matrix, where suddenly I was standing in a group of girls, and I suddenly saw like all the numbers between them.
Yeah.
And you see the social dynamic, because you would think, like, if you have something controversial to say to a group, you would think, okay, I'm going to go to the most popular person, right? I'm going to say it to them, and then if they accept it, then everyone else will. But that's not actually how it works. You need to go to the person with whom you have the strongest connection, who has the most points with the rest of the group. You get them to come along with it in like microseconds. They come along with it. The person they have the most points with comes along with it. And it's like a cascading effect. When I told my therapist that's when she thought I had autism.
Yeah.
She was like, most people don't think about that.
Yeah.
No, it's true. Yeah, we do. We do think differently.
It's all manual drive.
Yeah,
very
it's
true.
like, that's interesting you say that, because I think a lot of social interactions that a lot of people are just naturally can sense. You talked about like jumping in and kind of like what I'll do is like, not literally, but I picture myself kind of like circling, and I'm like just collecting data. I'm like, okay, this is how this works. And then it's like, then you jump in and you just hope that your hypothesis was correct.
Yeah.
It's very interesting.
And I would just like to say, make sure you check us out at www.autismfoundationok.org to learn more about who we are as a nonprofit, how we serve the Oklahomans with autism across the lifespan, and also to hear some more information about the trainings we have available, like our autism training for healthcare professionals, our create an autism-friendly business training, and our lead neurodiversity workplace training, autism inclusion in the workplace for employers and employees. All of these trainings can be custom tailored to your needs and be done in person or virtually. Thank you again for tuning in to Unmasking Autism with AFO. I'm your host, Carley Marissa Dummitt. Thank you again to the Oklahoma State Department of Health. And for any information on our trainings or our events, please visit www.autismfoundationok.org or follow us on social media platforms at Autism Foundation OK. As always, thank you so much, and we'll see you next time.